Deli.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good.
Good. To all of our listeners and watchers, welcome to the So Mom podcast. Whether you're starting your day with a cup of hot tea or coffee, driving to your next adventure, cooking something special, or just curling up for a quiet moment, we're so glad you're here. So settle in and join me and Adele, and we will share stories, laughter, and gentle conversation about life. This is your cozy corner to unwind and enjoy thoughtful company.
Hi, welcome to So Mom. Mom,
You're welcome.
did you start your day with a cup of hot coffee?
I started my day with a latte. Yes. Made by John, delivered in bed.
Oh, so nice.
I know, it's really nice. Well, I had a call from your brother this week, Robert. And Robert has a way of making my heart leap because he'll leave a message and he'll say, Mom, can you call me? I need to talk to you. And I go right to the worst. What has happened?
Well, he has that sort of Harrison Ford in Patriot Games voice. It's like, you need to call me now. Right? It's like,
No,
you got the call.
that's exactly right. And in his youth, there was reason for me to be afraid of that message. But he's now a dad of a 10-year-old. So he called me and he said, I need to ask your advice. Now, there are precious few times when your children grow older that they ask for your advice. So I get so excited when one of my kids asks for advice, and it had to do with parenting. And I start right away, and I can hear myself get into that teachery voice because he asked me a question. And, then I realized that he was just sort of waiting for me to stop so that he could tell me what was really on his mind or something else. And he was sort of bored with what I was saying. And then I realized that the difference was what he really wanted was validation of his parenting. And so when he said, I need your advice, it was mostly for me to listen. And I sort of reined myself in and I said, well, why don't you tell me what's going on? And then he loved it because, Rob, and he can expound on an issue or on almost anything. And he's so wonderful and such a great dad, but he just wanted to be validated.
Yeah. I mean, it's lucky for you. I think what is also validating is that you are from his original starter pack. You have people from early age that you look, especially, pre online generation, which is your generation and my generation and my brother's.
Yeah.
And you think, okay, so who are the people who I'm looking at? Who are the teachers, mentors, coaches? And it's lucky to be a parent and be in that starter pack of like people who are going to give me advice as I launch. And you stayed on, even if it's just honorary member. In your starter pack, when you were launching, to go all the way back to sort of the origin story of advice in your life, who was giving you good advice? Who was giving you terrible advice?
It's funny because in my family, my starter pack family, it was rarely advice. We were just given directives, and it was what you were to do. So the advice that my mother always said, and I think my dad too, they would say, be a lady. And that meant everything from the way my hair looked to the way I was dressing to the way I spoke to adults, everything, my table manners. There was something, there, it was a complicated message because it felt, and my mother was certainly not a submissive woman, but it felt submissive. And that was the direction of my era. The tough part about that is by the time I went to college, having had so many "don't do this, don't do that," my college friends and I, we were all 17, 18 years old, and we were alone for the first time, so we started dyeing our hair, swearing, wearing the most inappropriate clothes, wearing clothes as short as we could, so there was a real pushback to that advice. On the other hand, I think, for the times, my parents really just wanted us to grow into adults that other adults would like. My dad once said to me, "Being polite doesn't mean that you're a better person. It just means that adults won't hate being around you." And that was the way they saw the world. But they were good, decent people, and I took away little bits and pieces and really never wanted you all to be awful in public or throw temper tantrums, and I guess I inherited non-gentle parenting from them.
There's something about sort of, performing something for other people versus what you actually are, performing that you're good at school and being, polite and whatever this is it's really just for other people and not really answering whether it's your work habits or whether it's just sort of decorum, not really answering to anything inside. I think the premium on that kind of advice is does feel like old-fashioned advice because it's like that old Billy Crystal, "It's better to look good than to feel good," it's better to sort of be getting along and remembering to say, "Mr. Smith," and
Right.
over, like, "How are you feeling?" I think that's the biggest generational divide I see, are kids really, understanding in younger generations how to interrogate like wellness and self and like processing reactions and how is this landing in me and how does it feel? How am I feeling versus how I'm presenting? It feels like it's a bigger priority. But I remember in my first job when I worked in Macmillan Children's Books, Macmillan was a great big tall building in Manhattan, and I got in very low rung the children's books division, but the children's books division was making crushing amounts of money. I mean, Macmillan Children's had all the Newbery and the Caldecots, and it was very progressive in a way because it was always looking at like new artists, so it had this um new ways to explain hard things to young minds. So there was something about the kids book division that felt very out on the edge. But what was interesting to me going in and working for it was 100% women. I think there was one man in the art department, and yet it never got to carry, even though it was making all this money, even though it was doing spectacular things sort of in the culture, and that was weird messaging for me coming in, like, even though this is we're doing really cool things and making a lot of money, it's just also about, like, all those things that you said, being, like, polite and being quiet and not tooting your own horn every time another award was dropped on my boss's desk, and even she was just, like, so quiet and humble, and it was strange because we should have just been doing lots of victory laps. We weren't doing any victory laps. We were just excited if we got to go to the publishing dining room.
You know, it's not dissimilar in schools. There's a hierarchy for teachers, and very often lower school teachers are perceived as, because they're so child focused, that it's the soft education. Are they really teaching? Is it the same as if I'm teaching um, modern European history? Um, and they're teaching how to tie your shoes. But if you go into a lower school classroom, I would say it's some of the finest teaching you've ever seen. They are imagine managing 15, 20 little children who all want to speak and all want something to say, and they're teaching actually starting education from a place of inquiry, not from sage on the stage, I know better, here's what I'm going to tell you, but really asking children, what is this? How does it work? What's it doing? It's brilliant teaching. And I always felt that every teacher should walk into a great lower school classroom, but they're often pigeonholed as just teaching the little kids.
Well, even thinking about that when I became a writer and was writing for younger kids, I think it becomes like barriers to entry. People can come in and think, "Oh, I could teach second grade." The way they thought, "Oh, I could write books for, second graders or third graders." Yeah, I would have lots of adults say, "Oh, I love that you wrote that cute series about the witch twins. My child is also writing a series of books about witches. Here, you can even read it. Maybe you could, you know, critique it." And I had a friend say that would never happen in another profession. Like, "Oh, my kid also wants to be a doctor. Maybe you can look in the doctor kit." And, like it doesn't make any sense because I think as soon as people think, "Oh, I could do that," it sort of like becomes diminished and diminutive and, not important or wherever people are going in their heads with, "You don't need to give me advice about this. I can give you advice about this. We can go back and forth."
Yes, yeah, you are my peer.
Yeah, yeah, you're my peer. What is advice that has stuck for you?
I remember when I first went to teach at my mom's school, and she hired me, it was pretty brave of her, but she told me to keep my head down, not to really make waves. I guess she wasn't sure if I'd be okay in this job. Um, and she said, there may be some resentment, so don't really essentially just sit by yourself and don't say anything. And I thought, well, I can't work that way. And so I sort of barreled in and thought, take me as you see me, and was, really wanted to be part of the faculty. I didn't want to be perceived as adjunct administration by nepotism, essentially, or that I was a conduit back to my mother about what was happening. So I ignored that advice from her. And then when I was actually a head of school and I was negotiating for my contract, she was trying to tell me, low key your ask and, you know, essentially be grateful. And when I told her what I had been offered, because I was pretty aggressive about it, she looked at me and said, "Well, aren't you a little pig?"
What?
Yeah, she did. And I said, "Mom, you are a feminist. You can't say that to me. Women are still paid less than men." And I was asking to be paid as much as the men.
Right.
How about you?
Well, I remember when I first because I had started in editing and then moved into writing, and suddenly writing, which is a very private introvert's profession, has this bizarre component where you have to go to places and talk about your book. And I was at the American Library Association and they had panels, and I was very new to this idea of big, you know, those giant ballrooms filled with people. I had never spoken out loud, and I was put on these big panels, they kind of pair more senior people, and I was just starting out, and I was really scared, I had not realized that this would be part of the whole deal. I was sat next to a children's book writer named Jack Gantos, and he's written a lot of wonderful books for kids, and Jack probably saw me trembling like a leaf, and he said, "What's wrong?" And I said, I'm just too scared. My fight or flight was through the roof." And he said, "Oh, I promise you nobody cares about you. Nobody's watching you. You could do whatever you want. Nobody cares. What do you want to do right now?" And I said, "I want to run out of this. But I'm scared because what if it starts?" And this is what he did. He stood up and he left. He
did?
he stood up and he left. He was like, "I'm gonna show you how much nobody cares." He stood up and he left until it started, and he still wasn't there. He was just chatting with people outside. I mean, I don't know what was going on, but I did realize that it didn't matter. It was a great way of understanding that it would be the panel would continue. You know, even though he was sort of like the big person on the panel, there were enough people, like, if he had never come back, and then he came back, he kinda came sauntering back, and then he gave me a wink, like, it just nobody is disrupted by this, and
Yes.
somehow the panel continued, but I carried in the back of my mind that I thought I could leave this panel anytime. It's not hurting anybody, like, nobody's gonna be angry at you, nobody's going to even care where you went. And I think I put that thought into everything I do. I mean, I carry that because I still think fight or flight is hard for me, but it was great career advice because it just kind of pushed everything into it just right-sized everything I did. I was like, "There's no place." You know, I didn't invent the cure for anything. I'm not a brain surgeon. This is just about what it is and have an appropriate level of, engagement, but then also take care of yourself. It kind of is in the take care of yourself space.
I think fight or flight is probably so common for most of us who have to present or stand up or talk. And I can remember back in Philadelphia when I had to speak for the opening of school. And I prepared. It wasn't as though I wasn't prepared and I knew what I was going to say. And I remember turning to the associate head and said, "Mary, if I have to leave, will you just take over for me?" And she said, "I certainly will."
Yeah, I mean, being reliable is a big piece of advice that I wish that I didn't have such a serious relationship with, like, reliability,
Yeah.
but I think that that's a big part of, just that's that's my ongoing struggle to be like, it's
To be reliable?
no, that I am reliable, to be like, you don't have to always be reliable, and I married somebody who also feels that, so we're always sort of like reliability is, like, almost like the language, the partnership works on reliability, like, I'm reliable to you, you're reliable to me, and that's what makes things good, but then sometimes it's okay to not be so reliable all the time, you know?
I remember one of the first times I saw you speak in public, and it was probably, your first book no, I guess it was your second book, and it had won an award, and you had been asked to speak, to read a portion, and you were so scared, and I was sitting with Eric, and we were both not sure you were gonna make it up and to the podium, but sort of not sure, but pretty confident you would, but you were really wanting to run. And then you stood up and you looked down and then you looked up and with this big smile, you started writing or speaking. And you were so engaging and wonderful. And I remember Eric grabbing my hand and we held hands through your whole talk. What? But you were so good at it. And yet you still had that feeling.
I was reading in terms of, like, advice that people think is now or according to this article is, like, not great advice, um, is the idea of icing people out.
Mm.
So it's is has a lot of long-term, um, issues for on both sides, that it's not good for the person who feels that they hold all the cards as the icer,
Yeah.
and it doesn't do the icee any good either, that the icee that that over the years, if you say, "Okay, I'm estranged from this person," that you don't end up and you always feel upset about it, and then the person that you have cut out is also processing sort of that it never really goes away, that you can never really put it on on a shelf, that it's kind of like figure it out
Yeah.
and then set terms and walk away from it, if even if you're saying, "Okay, well, we can't be friends or this relationship is over. It's almost better to have a closing moment than the ghosting.
I think that's true. I think the
Go
ghosting is really
It
cruel.
hurts young people, like, you can feel that nobody has got their, armor on for ghosting.
No, you can't. I honestly look at kids today and the pain they go through, particularly with social media, and I think, I'm not sure. I was very sensitive as a child. I don't know that I would have survived it. It's just awful, and these kids get so hurt by it.
Yeah, yeah, they do.
And kids were mean
Well,
enough.
because you want to process through your things. You want to say how you feel, I think.
I think that when I look back to my marriage, um, I was so invested in the right outcome that I ignored all the red flags, and that's something that I think is important to know in a relationship. Are there red flags? Are there things that are so glaringly telling you that this is not healthy or good
In any relationship.
in any relationship? Yeah. Are you being used? Is this person really caring about you, or is it about the his ego, her ego, whatever it is? And when I look back, that was my scariest and saddest and still haunting worst message, was that I I knew saw the red flags, and nobody in my family saw them, but I did, and I have no one really to blame but myself, because I saw it and did nothing because I so wanted another outcome.
Yeah.
You know, red flags always start out simple. And I remember going to this big dance in college, and I was looking forward to the party as much as the dance, and I was the last girl to leave the dorm. That that Bob didn't show up until the party was basically over. We made the dance, and I was so excited to see him and so excited, and then I said, "How come you're so late?" And he said, "Well, I just got busy. I went swimming and then I just got busy." And I let it go. And I remember that was the first time, and I didn't think, what message am I being sent? How reliable is this person? And then each once you make that flag okay, then the person understands that, "Oh, yeah, she'll buy any of my stories," which I did until I didn't.
I think when, I had a child going through a friendship breakup a couple of months ago, and he was really getting into it about this person with other friends, kind of creating a personality and discussing this big, giant personality
Mhm.
of this person, right? And
Yeah.
I said, "If I could give you any advice, it's really stop stop wasting all of this emotional capital talking about this person." It's like, this is what I did in the '80s. We talked about, "Whoa, who is this person and how could this person?" and batted around all the terms. "Is a narcissist, is a bipolar," like, yeah, 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 like a bazillion hours on like exactly what kind of monster this person is. And it's like, it just doesn't matter. What the problem is that this person is, like, eating into the energy that you could be spending doing all sorts of cool things away from this person. So you need to shrink this other person down and focus on yourself and really start to think about, yeah, this doesn't work. I'm finished with thinking about all the reasons why it doesn't work. And let me just get back to my good life without this person in it, you know? But there is a tendency, especially I think when you're young, to sort of like look at every single angle of the person who's wrecking your life. I mean, I know I did that. I'm like, let me just create a big novel of this terrible person and how, oh, it's a pattern. Who cares? Who cares if it's a pattern? Who cares if this is dumb person that suddenly you're talking about 18 hours a day? That's actually the problem.
I I'll tell you, Adele, I thought that was such good advice, and the way you know how good it is that he repeated it to me as though it was his. And it was so cute because I knew what you had said, and I remember telling you at the time that I thought that was the best advice, and we used to just knit these things with my friends, and we always turned these guys into bigger
Right,
bigger
they were
than
some big
they.
movie stars. They were just the little annoying people.
Um, and then when he used it as his own, I thought that's the sign of great
Yeah, that it's,
advice.
like, in it. Because also as a parent, you're saying, "This person is not I am not going to waste any of my time talking about this person." You know, like, "You are the star of my show. I don't and nothing about this relationship made me see you in a better light by having access to this friendship. Like, you I like the solo act or, you know, the friends that make you happy." And I think being enchanted, but that was also kind of the bad advice of olden times was just so much enchantment for like, who are you going to marry? You know, like that was just it was very cultural and it really I don't see it anymore really.
It isn't there. I notice it with kids, they don't talk about, boys, they don't talk about that. They're really invested in their own lives, and I love that because that was the capital. I realized that when I brought him home, I was bringing home the prize pig because he was smart, he was handsome, he, was getting his doctorate at Georgetown. He was all of these things. He checked every box. And I thought, look at me finally. And that's the way that was viewed. So when you actually say this prize pig is in fact just a slab of bacon, what's the best and worst advice I ever gave you?
Um Best advice, worst advice. Best advice was sort of just go out and do your life. You know, you were very just go out and do your life kind of a mom. You know, like, I don't actually you didn't try to make me be one thing or another thing. You did that was your advice with Robert and Jeff too. I felt like we all just were like, "Okay, it's yours." Like, I didn't feel like, "I'm 18, but I'm 8 some days." No.
Mhm.
Like, be a grown up.
Yeah.
And that's helpful. Thank you for listening to So Mom. If you enjoyed this conversation, please give us a follow or a like, and we'll be back with you in a couple of weeks.
Or some advice.
Yeah, give us advice.
Give us advice or tell us your best and worst advice.